What's up YouTube, my name is Adrian from MMO's World and we are going to be taking a look at the top 5 most underrated MMORPGs that are out there today. Tons of MMOs have come and gone and there are a few that have been out for a while but have remained either stagnant or continues to fly under the radar compared to the amount of publicity and hype their competitors get. Based on that criteria, we've selected our list from a pool of MMOs that have been around for at least 7 years of the AAA variety but are not in the top 5 most played or most populated MMORPGs despite being acknowledged by critics as good games. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more MMORPG content. Let's start. At number 5 is DC Universe Online. Despite being a widely known IP and garnering good reviews from critics at launch, DC Universe Online continues to fly under the PC player base radar. For an MMORPG, DCUO doesn't do a whole lot wrong in our opinion. It's a free-to-play game that's based off the superheroes and villains from the DC Comics universe, and for the most part the game revolves around these characters through plot and storylines without players actually playing as them. At release, DCUO was a great alternative to the much beloved City of Heroes, which was the more popular of the two before it got shut down. DCUO is known for its pretty in-depth player character creator, allowing you to build a perfect hero, from costumes and outfits to powers like flying, and finally, you're able to choose a mentor type figure such as Superman or Batman who will be the one handing you missions and stuff. From a gameplay standpoint, DCUO is action combat based, with players using smaller pools of skills compared to other MMOs to battle. The regions are authentic and lets you visit authentic locations such as Gotham City and Metropolis. There are a bunch of quests to do, but the majority of your time will be spent in the main storyline with dungeons thrown in. It's got a decent recipe for an MMORPG, so why do people still think it's underrated? Well, we think that the dip in the PC player base for DCUO is very much down to the fact that the game released on Xbox and PlayStation in recent years. The gameplay feels a lot better with a controller for consoles than it does on the PC. So what must DCUO do to recapture its faltering PC player numbers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. At number 4 is Star Trek Online. STO is another big IP on the list, developed by Cryptic Studios and published by Atari, before Cryptic shipped it off to Perfect World Entertainment in 2011. STO is, as you'd expect, a pretty faithful MMORPG interpretation of the Star Trek universe, set in the universe timeline of 2409, 30 years after the events of Star Trek Nemesis. A lot of players flocked to Star Trek Online because of what it offered, a solid MMO story based on a beloved franchise, and space combat with ships that every player will get as a captain. There was so much potential, and remember, this was released in 2010, a full year before Star Wars The Old Republic was released. So as you can imagine, space opera fans only had STO and EVE Online to sink their teeth into. 7 years on, STO is still around, but it hasn't really recaptured the magic and hype it generated outside of loyal Star Trek fans. New updates in the past few years have not really brought in new players, which is a worrying sign for any MMORPG. The graphics may seem dated today, but STO still has a lot to offer, and that's why it's on our list of most underrated MMORPGs. At number 3 is The Secret World, aka Secret World Legends. The story of how this game is still relatively unknown among the broad MMORPG player base should be studied and archived for all MMO developers and studios to reference in the future. When Funcom first announced The Secret World, there was a mixed buzz within the MMO community. No one knew what to make of it. The game is set in a modern world with secret societies such as the Illuminati and Templars all vying for power. Myths and legends such as vampires, mummies, and Cthulhu all exist and formed the main narrative for the game. When TSW finally got a launch date, it picked perhaps the worst time imaginable to launch, in between Diablo 3 and Guild Wars 2, and sadly, not a lot of marketing and promotions could save it no matter how hard it tried. The game has quite a large loyal fan base due to its excellent storytelling and in particular, its fresh approach to MMO questing with investigation missions, requiring players to solve puzzles, use an in-game browser to research, and even deciphering Morse code. At the time, that was unheard of in MMOs, but ultimately the game never got its population very high and had to drop its subscription status for a buy-to-play model. Today, The Secret World is relaunching as Secret World Legends and will be completely free to play. We can only hope that the relaunch will bring back the much needed new wave of players to the game, because this is one underrated MMORPG that deserves its second chance. The relaunch has fixed old issues with the game, such as overhauling the combat system and much more. At number 2 is Wildstar. I think anyone can make a few cases for Wildstar. Is it the most overhyped MMORPG in recent times or the most underrated? For it to be on this list, you pretty much know the answer, so let's examine why. Carbine Studios, made up of former World of Warcraft developers, created Wildstar, a sci-fi fantasy MMORPG that was apparently going to challenge the big guns. It had an attitude and it reverberated throughout every piece of news article and video content the game published prior to release. It was really confident, perhaps too confident, and even launched as a subscription-only MMORPG, which fewer and fewer games do these days thanks to the dominance of World of Warcraft. Known for its incredibly challenging dungeons, interesting PvP telegraphic combat, and quirky stories, Wildstar was a hit for about a year before the players began returning back to whatever MMO they came from. Wildstar eventually went free-to-play and popped up on Steam last year. So what went wrong for this so-called WoW killer? Lack of content updates, long-running bugs, exploits, botting issues, class balances, and so much more. On top of that, add regular staff layoffs and management changes and the result is pretty obvious. It's a real shame because beneath the surface, Wildstar is actually a really good MMORPG that offers everything a modern MMORPG should offer. And they give it to players now for absolutely no charge. It's a wonder why the game hasn't attracted a bigger audience since becoming free to play, which is why it will continue to be underrated for some time to come. At number 1 is TERA. By now, 3 out of 5 people watching this would have heard or played TERA before. The problem is that even being free to play and out for almost 5 years now, TERA is still in the wilderness when it comes to picking a list of the top MMORPGs. At release, TERA was pretty much nailed by majority of critics for being boring and uninspiring with the game's characters, lore, and story. Most will not give a crap about anyone or anything in game, and the lasting appeal was relatively poor. And most players who hit the level cap will never stay around for the grind and move on. Valid reasons, but the one thing that everyone universally agreed upon was that in that time when it was released, the combat system was way ahead of any other MMORPG out in the market. And keep in mind, this was before Guild Wars 2 was released. Today, TERA's combat still holds up, and it's that action-packed flexibility that makes it incredibly fun to play. It's even coming to consoles. The sad part is, the game has improved over the years since release, but due to the very early criticisms, that side of the game was never reported on as much, which is why TERA continues to be left out of the MMORPG conversations these days. Had it been released way back in 2004, before World of Warcraft, then I'll have to agree with IGN saying that it could have been the poster child for how MMO combat could have been defined. It's still going though, and it's undoubtedly one of the most underrated MMORPGs in the modern era. And there you have it, those are our top 5 most underrated MMORPGs of 2017. Which MMOs do you think should also make the list? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For more on MMORPGs, hit that subscribe button and check us out at mmosworld.com. As ever, I'm Adrian from MMOs World, signing out.